we need a good laugh. Let's start at the top of the program. We just talked it extensively, told several stories about Kamala, the Ugandan giant, on the Drive-Thru 2 weeks ago or 2 shows ago. Hadn't even been 2 full weeks. And then, of course, we got the news that he passed away just several days ago now as we're recording this. And, so we said a lot of, what I actually felt, all good stuff. Such a great gimmick, a great guy. We talked about some of the stories, the way that he got into it. The whole gimmick was by accident, and mentioned, and somebody brought up, as a matter of fact, on Twitter when they were talking about it, he was at the Mid-South Coliseum that night when Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett saw him and got the idea for Kamala, or booked him first and then got the idea for Kamala because he was coming to borrow some gear from Troy Graham, the Dream Machine, because they were friends from Sugar Bear Harris. Started out in Mississippi with the Culkins when they were running opposition to Watts. They were on the outs with Mid-South Wrestling, same as Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy, Percy Pringle. Who else was in that bunch? An old friend of Percy Pringle's, Mike Hendricks. He was amazed that I remembered Mike Hendricks because nobody else does. He was a wonderful guy, but he just didn't stick with the business very long. But anyway, so Kamala had come to see Dream because they were friends from the Mississippi days. He was going to borrow something, and that's where the whole thing started. So, which it was kind of cool because the Dream Machine got his spot in much the same way. No wonder so many people used to come to the back of the Mid-South Coliseum on Monday nights. Dream lived in Memphis and, wanted to see if he could get booked, and showed up and bore a remarkable resemblance physically and promo wise enough to get by to Dusty Rhodes. They made him the Dream Machine under the mask. But anyway, Kamala, I get the one story that we didn't tell, and you can look at it. It's on YouTube, so it won't cost you anything. We're not trying to sell you anything because we told all those stories just recently, and I feel bad because I never called him James. We called him Sugar Bear before he was Kamala, and then, since I'd known him for a while, I always called him Ooga Booga. And, that was, so back in those days, you didn't call people by the name on their driver's license. You kind of, called them by what people called them in the locker room, or they were billed as. But anyway, we told a bunch of stories about him. The one we didn't tell, and this is probably at least something funny, in honor of Kamala, Lawler, the night that he played the fucking rib on Kamala. I've never told you this story, Brian Last. You have not heard this, is what you're saying to me?
I don't believe I've heard the story. No.
Okay. So in those days, you drove everywhere in the Tennessee territory. Memphis on Monday, Louisville on Tuesday, Evansville on Wednesday, either Lexington or something in northern Kentucky or southern Indiana on Thursday, back at the Memphis end on Friday, TV on Saturday morning, back to Nashville on Saturday night. It was a continuous loop. All the guys knew all the roads. It was boring if you didn't do things to keep it fresh, which is where all the great road ribs, it seems like, come from Tennessee. The naked midget in the trunk at the toll booth, or the Fargos shooting each other in front of the hitchhiker and making him help dispose of the body, or whatever the case may be, because the guys were driving every night on these same roads every week, right? So Lawler had made this trip back from Memphis to, Nashville probably 5 million times. He knew the roads, he knew what was going on. And he also, back in those days, you could get the red cop light. You could get a red light that you could stick on the top, like even Smokey and the Bandit in those movies when he sticks his hand out the window and puts the light on the top of his car. You've seen that in the movies. You could get those, right? And Lawler also being one to go to any lengths for a rib because he learned from Fargo. He had shit in his car all the time, like a loudspeaker connected to his CB radio where he could, or a fucking megaphone or something. He could do all this shit, right? And he pulled a number of guys over in the Tennessee territory with the red cop light throughout the years. Well, now it's the middle of the night and he pulls up. I don't know, maybe Calhoun was in the car with whoever was in the car with Lawler. Kamala's riding by himself. James Harris, he's just a big old teddy bear outside the ring, but he's 6'6", he's 350 pounds, he's bald-headed. And he's a black guy in the South in the early 80s, in the middle of the night by himself. He's getting pulled over by a cop because he looks up and he sees a red light. And he's like, oh, and he pulls over the side of the road. And he's sitting there. He don't want to get out of the car because, I mean, he's a fearsome looking fucking guy. When he got out of a car, it looked like the car ought to get out of him, right? He was so big. So he's sitting there, but he hears a voice on a loudspeaker. Okay, boy. Sounds just like Sheriff Buford T. Justice, right? And the fucking Smoking the Bandit. Okay, boy. Get out of the car and face away from me. So he gets out of the car and he's facing down, toward the road. And the cop, well, walk backward toward me. Don't look at me, boy. Walk backward. And he walks back. He takes some steps backwards and he's, stop right there. And then the cop comes up behind Kamala and starts patting him down. And he pats his shoulders and he pats his side around his waistband and everything, right? He pats his legs and everything, make sure he ain't got anything in his pant legs and everything. And then this cop's arm, his hand, comes right up between Kamala's legs, grabs him right around the dick. And Kamala's face goes fucking ape shit, and he's scared to turn around. And then all of a sudden, Lawler says something in his regular voice. I can't even remember what it was. I'm sure Kamala didn't either, but he heard Lawler's voice and turned around and was so fucking relieved that he didn't get mad.
Oh, Memphis.
Well, there you Memphis. Anyway.
I put up on Twitter when he passed, because, each week Mike Mills and myself review Mid-South Wrestling shows on the Mid-South Wrestling Television Review. And it gave me a whole new appreciation for Kamala, seeing his run in Mid-South in 82 and 83. And I think you could argue that's the best he was ever used.
Yeah.
In 1982, 1983. Bill Watts knew how to use him. He body slams Andre. It's the most impressive body slam of Andre you'll ever see.
Because here's the thing. A lot of guys slammed Andre, and because Andre knew how to work and until he got older was nimble enough to do it, I know for somebody who's never been in this position, that sounds ridiculous. He could give you enough help where if he wanted you to do it and you were a fairly stout person, you could do it if he wanted you to, right? But when Kamala did it, Andre went up like he normally did and to kind of turn because he never took a real high one because nobody was giving him a high one. Kamala got up under him and you could see him actually take him up an extra fucking foot and turn him. He was under him and slammed him. Once Andre got up there, Kamala fucking had him. And that didn't happen very often. That's why I said when we were knocking his work, because that's the whole way he got the gimmick and made his name and fortune, was the fact that he wasn't a good worker. And his punches were the shits, which is why he chopped. But I didn't say he couldn't knock you out. He was a big, giant, strong fucking human being. He just couldn't hit you very well. And he wasn't, so he had to find a gimmick that fit that unique way he had of moving around. Because I mean, he's at that size, he's leapfrogging, so he's athletic, but some people just aren't natural workers. Well, we see those every week on AEW. But he found that thing that fit, and he was able to have a whole style around what worked for him, and he did different shit than everybody else.
And it worked perfectly, because you could say he couldn't work in the traditional sense. He was the perfect worker as Kamala.
Yeah, nobody else could have been Kamala.
No one else could have done it as well as he did. Nobody. I was curious your thoughts, because he had various managers throughout the years in the WWF and various places. Do you think Skandar Akbar was his best manager? Because I actually think he may be the perfect fit for Akbar, watching all this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he started out with J.J. Dillon in Memphis, but J.J. was in Florida. That was part of the Florida-Tennessee talent trade. So they were just, J.J. was they didn't want to give another guy to Jimmy Hart, and they wanted Kamala to be special and stand out. So if he had this well-known, renowned manager that we weren't even familiar with in the Tennessee territory, but we'd seen in the magazines and et cetera on television, that made him different. And really, that's where they gave him the Friday or Kim Chi, the handler and the beekeeper outfit, because he needed somebody to come to the ring and at least take his stuff and handle him. Because you can't send a goddamn Ugandan giant that doesn't speak English and is a babbling maniac out in the people, without a handler, it wouldn't look right, right? It'd look like, hey, King Kong, go down to the corner and get me a fucking hot dog and come back on your own. You can't do that, right? So the Beekeeper outfit and the Friday and the Kimchi was Buddy Wayne and then various people, Frank Dalton, I think, in Mid-South. But I think you're right, yes, because he had managers in the WWF, and he got funny at that point because everything had to be funny there. They booked him right in Memphis, but he was just getting started. So they put him over as an attraction and got the most out of him they could. And then, Lawler got his win back. But then when they sent him to Bill Watts, he had more towns. He had a territory tailor-made toward making a guy like that, a big monster heel. And Akbar had heat and was serious. And Akbar always did best with a kind of a freak show, stable of, whatever, violent individuals. So yeah, that worked the whole thing. And plus, in Memphis, they weren't going to be able to put him in the ring with Andre the Giant and with all those top guys. So he really, being in the ring with all those top guys also helped him not only look like a bigger star, but also perfect more of his shit. And then Dallas, he had a heck of a run also, and that TV was perfect there because, you could see him up close and he looked fucking, he didn't look like he was goddamn reading a book during his fucking matches. He looked like a Ugandan giant. So even at world-class TV up close, they still thought he was fucking nuts.
That's one of the interesting things, and I've heard it from Mike Mills, and I've seen other people type it in the last few weeks or put it on Twitter or whatever, in that he's one of the last guys that I've heard people say legitimately scared them. Mike Mills has told me when I was a kid, Kamala scared me. I was frightened of Kamala. I didn't know what the Junkyard Dog was going to do with this guy. He's one of the last guys in wrestling that really scared people. People believed in him.
Well, and I didn't experience that because I had known him before and I was already smart, right? But it's the same principle as the Sheik. Because the Sheik scared me because first time I saw him and all the magazines and everything, I wasn't smart. And also in person, let's put it this way. If I'd have been on a wrestling show, even after I was smart with the Sheik, I would have fucking run extra fast from him because, of obvious reasons, and you never knew. But those guys that you can't tell that they don't drop it, that look somewhat off, or are fearsome, or you don't want to fuck with. It's a generational, but it's universal. Before you get smart and then before everybody gets lawsuit happy, these guys will scare you if they do what they're supposed to do.
I want to say one more thing about Kamala, but I got to tell you this now. A Sheik story recently came up. Mike Johnson of PW Insider was on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Live, which is on Facebook on Saturdays and then is on the Arcadian Vanguard video channel. And they were telling a story about when the Sheik did his one and only autograph appearance ever in the States for John Arezzi at John's convention. John never said a word to him the whole time he was there. He had to deal with the Sheik's wife. Sheik did not break kayfabe once. But Mike Johnson said that he remembers at one point, I guess the Sheik was with his saber or his sword, whatever you want to call it, chasing people around the lobby of the hotel. And he said, just imagine like someone comes in off the street to get a hotel room, and there's the Sheik chasing people around with his sword. I want to say one more Kamala thing. Are you familiar with Lenny Dykstra?
Baseball?
Baseball, member of the 1986 world champion New York Mets.
Oh, I should have known.
I should have known. Hit a home run to win Game 3 of the NLCS against the Houston Astros. Lenny tweeted out, #Kamala RIP. My condolences to his family, friends, and the Ugandan people. And then he tagged the governor of Uganda.
Now, wait a minute. Is he that sharp that he's fucking with us and that's so good? Or is he bought it and he's not that sharp? Because that's so good, I can't tell.
I'm not sure, but someone replied, he's from Mississippi, bro. And then Lenny replied, what's your point? I'm from Orange County, California, yet the fans of the greater New York City and greater Philadelphia embraced me as one of them.
Okay. He's with it. He's with it.
I don't know how with it he is.
Well, because
My condolences to the Ugandan people.
Kamala may have been from Mississippi, but the people of Uganda embraced him as one of their own. So,
I'm sure they're very proud of Kamala in Uganda.